welcome back to the most sensual and sultry podcast that has ever been created on the interwebs. We're on episode 43 now. 43, yeah. Man. What a long and arduous journey this has been.
What a misery this has all been.
Hopefully somebody will put us out of our misery soon by letting us sell out. So we are joined again today as we are going to talk about the pagan holiday that is Christmas. And I'm really excited for this. We're joined by resident faith and whatever historian, but that's not how he makes his living.
I've been promoted.
You're the whole department, man. Like we don't have a history department if you're not a part of this. Dr. Eric Myershofer is just a professor of all things historical and probably even some semantical. We're pretty stoked today. So history of Christmas. This is a big one because evangelical Christians love to be offended about a lot of things.
Yeah.
In there. And taking the Christ out of Christmas is one of those things. I write the word X-I-A-N when on Facebook, or I Xmas when on Facebook or social media platforms because it saves time there. And it's always you're one of those. I actually had somebody tell me that. You're one of those people to do. To which I responded, I don't know what you're talking about. Because we're not even going to go there. So...
the X literally comes from the key for Christ.
Yeah. And so, but that's not a,
So why do you put it in history?
In
you don't write history with an X?
What?
HXST?
No, because
history?
the X is
Kai.
CH.
Key Kai.
It's a new trend. Sorry, I thought you guys had seen it.
Oh, no.
We're not up to the trends like you are, Chris.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to figure out
Catch
why
up,
everybody's
guys.
mad about the Starbucks cups. I'm really trying to figure it. Have you seen
Still
where
trying
they
to figure out
draw?
what's up with this gorilla everyone keeps talking about.
The funniest meme I've seen all year is that 2016 started with a gorilla, Harambe, and it ended with the gorilla dying, Castro. But one is guerrilla, the other is like guerrilla warfare.
It looks a lot better when you read it.
Yeah, fair enough. So
That's a dad joke.
it was pretty good though. It was pretty good.
Not bad.
So,
I think our levels are way too high, by the way. When we laugh.
Maybe it's just your headphones.
Yeah, your headphones are turned all the way up.
All right.
We are going to talk about Christmas and its history, and we just really want to jump right into it. You got anything you want to add?
Well, we had you last time when we talked about Halloween. We found out that we need to put the Christ back in Halloween because it's a church holiday. Now we're gonna find out how that's quite the opposite.
Christoween, Hollow Christ.
Got to put the pagan back into Christmas.
Yeah,
because that's where it belongs. So so some people like to sort of prod. I'm one of those people about the possible pagan background to Christmas. Excuse me. First of all, is that an accurate prodding or not?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, I want to tell you something I've heard, and you can deconstruct this. I heard a Lutheran minister talk about how foolish of a notion this was that Christmas was a pagan holiday, but instead, it's just that Jesus was conceived on March 25th, right? There's this ideology that's kind of floating around that the Virgin Mary was, received the Holy Spirit, and Christ, his birth date is 9 months after the March 25th. There, and somehow that's how it lands on Christmas. Have you heard this before anywhere ever?
No, I'm surprised I haven't actually. I mean,
have you heard of March 25th, Chris?
People try to make it the spring because the shepherds are out in the fields.
it was kind of nice.
But that would be for Christmas.
Right,
not
but he
for
was very
conception.
specific about this exact date, that March 25th.
I bet he read it somewhere on the
It's
internet.
essentially teleological because you're counting 9 months back. From,
Yeah, okay, so it's, and that's what he says. It's that
25th.
simple, right? That it had to, okay, I don't know. So never mind. Maybe that doesn't need as much debunking as I thought because it's just a stupid assumption.
It is.
Okay. So continue.
Well, here's the thing. The first thing, we get a little bit of astronomy. Right now, the winter solstice is on, the 22nd?
December
I think it is
22nd.
21st, 22nd. Okay, but remember that our calendar, we have leap years, and so our calendar isn't perfect. So it's the 22nd now, but it would have been much, 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 much later in the BC period. So you had not just Rome, but just about every human civilization had a celebration of the winter solstice. Because the winter solstice is, this is a powerful thing before electricity, and we don't have much, you have no natural, you have very little natural light because you have the longest, night. And it had a powerful meaning for just about every single civilization, prehistorical, up through electricity even, and now. So that there was always some festival associated with that. So the first thing to remember is that the 25th would have been winter solstice in the ancient world. And I don't know if it would have been, I'd have to look it up. You can all Google it. If that was still the case in the Roman Empire in the 1st century, because maybe they just had that date and they kind of kept it. But so there would have been a winter solstice, and in this case, the Roman Empire, Saturnalia. So that was true for every single culture in the world has a winter solstice celebration.
Okay, so that kind of sets the stage that, so pagan or not pagan is just kind of a part of life. It wasn't necessarily, I mean, it was just a holiday that everybody understood to be important.
Yeah. Well, it's because society was so much more attuned to harvest, right? And to the cycles of nature. Because
and so that's a big deal when it's the shortest day of the year, right? When the sun goes down earlier. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and a little small point here is that not only was the winter solstice, became for Christians Christmas, which was the celebration of the birth of Christ, but we used the summer solstice for the birth of John the Baptist. So
that I did not know.
And that was based on the passage where John the Baptist says,
I was born during the summer solstice.
He must increase. So the idea is that starting with the winter solstice, the days start increasing, so that's the days of Christ. And starting with the summer solstice, the days start decreasing, that's the days of John the Baptist.
The thing of it is, a book I can highly recommend is, if you haven't read it, and I know it may seem a little boring, but Eusebius, the History of Christianity, or it's translated different titles, but essentially he tells the history of Christianity between 100 or
History
so.
of the Church.
History of the Church,
yeah.
And Constantine. And one of the most, again, I'm a history geek, so take that for what it's worth. I think one of the most fascinating...
A lot. It's worth a lot.
One of the most fascinating passages in there is where, chapters, is where he goes through the debates that took place, and this is before the churches East and West, the debates that took place in the 3rd century over when do you celebrate Easter. Christ's birth is not really a big part of that discussion. It's mainly Easter, and the whole chapter, should we celebrate it here?
Well, that's because everybody already knew he was born on the 25th. Is that right?
Exactly.
That was already a done decision.
At that point, was it a lunar versus solar calendar debate, or is that not yet?
Not yet. No. That comes much later.
Okay.
I should write notes for that. But no, that comes much later.
Because there are Christian churches or church traditions that follow the lunar calendar for figuring out Easter, and that's why some Easters are different with some church traditions.
Exactly. Would we see that in like the Egyptian Orthodox
the Coptic church,
Yeah, Coptic.
For example.
And the reality of it is, in the 1st century, just about every civilization was still using a lunar calendar. Rome, maybe the Maya, and the Aztec weren't around yet, so maybe the Maya were about the only two using a solar calendar. I mean, a solar calendar was a really rare kind of thing. So everyone's using a lunar calendar, and things are always moving around. You're always adding a little bit extra date and things like that.
Okay, so this kind of lays the bedrock then for our discussion. And when does this co-opting or kind of Christianizing, this stealing, however we want to, appropriating, whatever we want to use, when does that take place, or when do we kind of see that move to be settled on as the date in terms of December 25th? This is what we're doing. This is what we're calling.
It seems to have been a gradual process over time, and that we know that certainly by the early Middle Ages, around the 800s, we know that that's pretty much consistent throughout the West, that you have that. Now, the Eastern Church began celebrating on the 6th of January, and that for them was, again, going off that same winter solstice, but for them it was when presumably the Magi arrived, and then they're celebrating off of that.
That's actually really cool.
But the thing of it is that, like most things, when a religion comes from a place of its origin to a different culture, people try to adapt it in a different way, and it certainly appears to be the case. When you think of what are the colors of Christmas?
Red and green.
And white, right?
And white. Yeah, nailed it.
What are the colors of the Italian flag? Red, white, and green. Red, white, and green were the colors of the Roman Empire. Those were the standard colors. And so what you have is Christians appropriating, which, by the by, there's some who think, I've actually read some tracts where it's like, oh, this is completely pagan, we shouldn't celebrate it. I can talk about the Puritans a minute if you want, but the idea that, let's take these things and transform the meaning of them. So if the evergreen tree, which was used because everything's dying in winter except you have this evergreen tree, and that stays green throughout the winter.
From which region would somebody find an evergreen?
Mainly Central and Northern Europe.
Okay.
As I was thinking through this, I'm like, this is a Mediterranean, so everything's still kind of green in the Mediterranean. But again, as you're expanding Christianity into these other cultures, and as you get further north, it gets darker. So this whole holiday becomes more important. basically the evergreen tree is like, well, let's transform the meaning of that to not just that, spring, the promise of spring, but the promise of new life in Christ. Red, white, and green, that can become, well, the red's the blood of Christ, the white's the purity of Christ, and green is the promise of everlasting life. And so what you have is a gradual process.
I never knew what those colors stood for. I assumed red and white were what they were, but I didn't know what green. It just seemed like, that's a good compliment. We're just going to throw that in. And green M&Ms are really good. And so that's kind of what I was thought it was up in the air until the M&M company came around.
Yeah, and that simply becomes it is, okay, let's take these things, and because people culturally don't like to let go of festivals and things like that. And you see evidence of this anywhere Christianity has been, especially throughout Europe. Much of what we think of in the United States as Christian is really European. And Christianity didn't start in Europe.
Krampus is a great example of this, right?
Yeah, well, I don't even know when that. To be honest, raised in a German household, didn't know about Krampus until the movie came out. It was not a thing in my household.
No, that's good for you.
So maybe not in southern Germany, or maybe I don't know. My mom was not German, so maybe that affected. But no, so you have these, people want their festivals. So you say, okay, you can celebrate your festival. Let's change things around, and really Christ's birth in and of itself, the time that happens isn't important in and of itself. I mean, like Easter is connected to Passover very clearly, but his birth, I mean, it's connected to, the story, the Massacre of the Innocents, the census, Joseph and Mary going to Bethlehem, the Star of Bethlehem, all those sorts of things. But there's nothing to indicate a specific point in time. And biblical historians, biblical people who try to figure this out, most seem to agree on somewhere around September was probably his actual birth date. And then it probably wasn't even year one. It may have been -2 or +3. There's some debate on that. So that you have the idea of let's take this seems to be a big holiday, let's transform the meaning of it, and that way we can reemphasize Christ. And as the Pope gains more power in the West, especially, between 800 and 1200, increasingly this becomes a more central part of sort of the European ecclesiastical calendar, that Christmas becomes a big deal.
You got anything, James?
No, but something I wanted to ask you, and I don't know if this is answerable or maybe it just takes too much time, but so I mean, obviously Christmas, the Christian Christmas is an appropriated holiday. Mm-hmm. We took previous celebrations, we took what we liked, we left what we didn't like, we appropriated it. I always wondered if it was a natural appropriation that just happened culturally, or if it was more of a political appropriation to sort of press like empire, because empires do that, right? Empires will take over a culture, an area, and then they'll reassign all their symbols, all of their holidays to fit the empire's propaganda. And I wondered if maybe Christmas had come out of Christian empire in that way.
Not initially. I mean, if we think of the two emperors that are most associated with Christianity, the Roman Empire, Constantine and Theodosius. Constantine, there's often this, and I blame Dan Brown for this, there's often this assumption that Constantine made Christianity,
He's the author of those books.
All of that aside, he gets his history wrong. I mean, forget the theology. He doesn't even get his history right. And then he borrowed, that's another story for another time. Anyway, so...
Join us next week as we discuss Dan Brown and his terrible history.
But the idea that Constantine was the one who brought Christianity to the Roman Empire, Constantine kind of sort of maybe converted. What I mean by that is that he, like most Roman officials and military folk who were already converting to Christianity, he put off baptism till his death. But he continued as Roman emperor to celebrate all of the pagan holidays. So he wouldn't have certainly made I have no evidence that he made Christmas. I don't think he did at all. And Theodosius, again, I'd have to look in the details of this, but he would have not celebrated it at all.
To defend or give, to sort of talk about Constantine still celebrating all the Roman holidays. I mean, for them, they weren't making that fine distinction between religion and politics or nationality. Like for them, I mean, that was an extension of his Romanhood, to be part of those festivals.
Oh, absolutely. So yeah, and it becomes more political. I think it starts as cultural, but it certainly becomes more political, especially as the Western Church gets in more and more conflict with the Eastern Church. And if I can squeeze in my little story here, I don't know if I have time to do this later, but to get a sense of this, when the Reformation comes, One of the things that Calvinists in particular did, and especially Puritans that we associate with, that you really love the story, that we associate with England, the Pilgrims that came over, they refused to celebrate Christmas. They said it is a popish Roman holiday. It is part of the church that's been corrupted by paganism.
That's why they're never happy about anything, dude.
Oh, then you'll love this story. This gets better. So they refused to celebrate it at all. So fast forward, you get the Mayflower coming, first Christmas in Plymouth Colony. They're settled there, and they're building a fort, and they have not been getting along with Native Americans. And so Christmas Day comes, all the Puritans get up. There were most of them. There were a few non-Puritans among them as well. And they said, okay, let's get up, let's build the fort. And the guy said, well, it's Christmas Day. They said, yeah, but we don't celebrate that. So come on, get up, let's build the fort. And these guys wanting a day off, they said, yeah, but we're supposed to be about religious freedom. We signed the Mayflower Compact. You're supposed to respect our... He says, fine, okay, you guys may celebrate Christmas. We're going to go work on the fort and build a wall. So they go off and build the wall. They come back, and these guys indeed had celebrated, which is still mostly a tradition in a lot of places in England today. They celebrate Christmas basically by getting completely drunk. And then they were playing a stickball game, essentially, with throwing a ball on a stick. And so the leader of the Pilgrims comes back, who should come to mind but doesn't. He comes back and sees all of this and is just furious. These guys, they've been working hard, and these guys have been goofing around all day, haven't been religious at all. So he takes their ball and says, I'm not giving this back to you. If you want to celebrate your popish holiday, you will do so in prayer in your private quarters. And he takes their ball away and leaves and makes them go pray for the rest of the day. And I think that's... I only half joke and people,
that's where we get the phrase "taking my ball and going home."
There you go, and that's as I tell people.
Nailed it.
You want to look at the beginning of War on Christmas? Puritans.
Thanks a lot, Puritans.
Pilgrims started the war on Christmas. So.
People keep blaming Obama. It should be thanks, Puritans.
You should be going to Plymouth Rock. And
thanks a lot, God.
Protesting at Plymouth Rock.
That's good for the podcast, Josh.
And so, here's my, I guess, to kind of bring this into a summation of things. We tend to hear from, all of us kind of grew up in the conservative church to some degree or another, or worked in it or whatever. And so we kind of tend to hear this ideology of trying to really be careful and intentional about being separatist in terms of not being in the world but not being of the world, and yada, yada, yada. And Christmas, I have seen in the last few years, has kind of been dragged into that cultural conversation as well. And so because of the idea that it is pagan or whatever, is it possible to avoid appropriation this late in human history? I guess is my ultimate question, because it seems like everything that we do that is related to Christianity has some roots or has some, argument that could be made that it's not necessarily what we would consider the purest of origins there. So for people who are sensitive to that and want to celebrate, what I guess would your advice be about towing the line for trying to respect your own personal convictions and sensibilities to that stuff?
Well, I'd say first off, at the root, to remember that all culture is appropriation, and it's always an ongoing process, that we always borrow from the past. I think most families, to be honest, when you start a family, you get married, and especially once you start having children, one of the first discussions you have is, how are we going to celebrate Christmas? And I think there's enough within that. I know my wife and I won't go into details, but we celebrated Christmas somewhat differently. My family being German was more about Christmas Eve. Her family being more Americanized, it was more about Christmas Day, and we had different things.
Midnight.
That's when we'll celebrate.
Yeah, we used to open presents on Christmas Eve, and so getting married.
And you just possibly couldn't wait 12 more hours.
Well, we do, because happy wife, happy life. So
that's probably the greatest history lesson you could give in 4 words.
But no, there was compromise though. She, there's certain things that we do that she's accepted, like we're celebrating St. Nicholas.
Claudius. Sorry, go ahead.
We're celebrating St. Nicholas Day tonight. But that's the first thing, is that there's enough just family traditions that may or may not have to do with the church that you have enough. And I think everyone has to just negotiate their own way. And I think we should spend less time worrying about what's good, what's not, what's pure, what's not. And if you want to say, okay, let's make this about Christ and peace, then let's make this about Christ and peace, and not try to aggressively greet people with a Merry Christmas and seeing how people react. And I think it should just be, being peaceful, being happy, rejoicing with friends and family, certainly rejoicing in Christ. I mean, in that way we can all agree, it's, as a Christians, you want to celebrate Christ every day.
Only Christmas. And maybe Easter if there's time.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is I will just leave with that one little thing is that I noticed the various churches I've gone to, and this is probably true in a lot of American churches, Christmas seems to be a much more involved deal than Easter.
Oh, so much so.
That, especially in the Protestant church, Lent is kind of ignored because it's too Catholic or something, and Lent's kind of ignored, and suddenly it's
you just waved your hands like you were doing like a magic voodoo thing.
It's like,
well, like Talladega Nights says, we like the baby Jesus, 8-ounce baby Jesus.
8-ounce baby Jesus, like bite-sized baby Jesus.
8 pound.
Could be read in a lot of ways.
So yeah, and so okay, then this is a quick aside. Last question, dad question. Do you allow your kids to believe in Santa Claus, or is that too anti-Christ? Not like the Antichrist, but
it's anti-intellectual for me.
This gets into all kinds of problems. I'm just going to lay it out. What we did was, like I said, we do St. Nicholas Day. When I was growing up with my kids too, that means you get a book, encourage reading, and then at
that's
Christmas,
really cool. Actually, I've never heard of St. Nicholas Day. Like at all. I don't even know what that is.
It's so many different ways, but it basically put shoes out, you get candy and stuff. But the other thing is that we did, and it was a fun thing to go along. We just played it as a fun thing. I mean, you play pretend with your kids.
And then at what age do you slam home the reality that Santa's not real? Like really drive and devour dreams.
We did. We thought we would have to, and we didn't, because our kids, when they started getting about 9, 10, 11, they started joking about it. And our return joke was, well, if you don't believe in Santa, he doesn't bring any gifts. And so...
then you got him nothing for Christmas for 3 years.
Well, that was the thing, was that our kids would be... It was sort of a wink... But that's the thing is, it sort of goes naturally. It's sort of a wink, wink, nod, nod till about 16. And then we just, here's your Santa gift. Here's your stocking. And they know it's us.
Yeah.
And we'll even joke back and forth. Oh, look what Santa...
Would you ever change your penmanship?
Right. Yeah, when they were little, I drive with my left hand. We take the bite out of the cookie. My wife and I, our biggest disagreement over Santa was that, again, growing up in a German household, Santa, we left him beer and pretzels. And my wife,
so cool.
Yeah, my wife.
Maybe that's why Santa never comes to America.
He doesn't make it this past Berlin.
So we had this split.
Santa's been sloshed.
My dad and my father-in-law thought that was a great idea. My wife and my mother-in-law did not think that was a great idea. So Santa got milk and cookies, and I went
beer and cookies.
Well, no, beer and pretzels. Beer and pretzels.
But the compromise there.
Trust me, I tried.
Best of both worlds.
It didn't work, so I just had beer and pretzels.
And so this is really good. And what I guess ultimately I appreciate about this story is kind of the personal touch that gets involved in that, because really what it does is it takes the realm of the conversation out of the ethereal and brings it into kind of personalized stuff, and it's no longer just a trope of anything, but it's actually got some legs underneath it. So that's valuable for me. So James, Chris, you guys have anything?
I think we covered it.
Chris? Solid? All right. So be sure to check us out on social media, facebook.com/faithandwhatever. You can find us on Twitter. I'm at Josh_Carmen. Dr. Myershofer is too cool for you, so you don't get his Twitter handle. Jamothy is at James, YUILE, and Chris is at Marion Ranch. Thanks so much for stopping by. We'll see you soon.